Story 1. Shafilea Iftikhar Ahmed's story begins before she was born, with her parents lives in two different countries. Her father, Iftikhar Ahmed, was born in a village called Uttam in the Gujarat district of Pakistan. He spoke Punjabi as his first language. When he was 10 years old, his family moved to England. As a young man, he traveled to Denmark, and there he met a Danish woman named Vivi Lone Andersen. She was a Christian. In 1980, they had a civil wedding in Copenhagen, and later they had a son named Tony. Iftikhar's family, especially some of his male relatives, did not accept his relationship with Vivi. For a time the family was happy, but then Iftikhar's mother died. His family called him back to Pakistan. In 1985, while he was there, his family arranged for him to marry his cousin Farzana. It was a forced marriage. Farzana told Iftikhar that if he refused to marry her, she would kill herself. After that wedding, Iftikhar telephoned Vivi in Denmark. He told her he was returning to England and asked her to come live with him. He did not tell her that he had taken a second wife. When Vivi arrived, Iftikhar and Farzana, who was already heavily pregnant, had moved into a home together in a mostly Asian area of Bradford. Iftikhar then admitted the truth. Vivi was upset and filed for divorce. She left the apartment in the same month she had arrived. Iftikhar later called her again to say that Farzana was giving birth to a daughter. He told Vivi that if he and Farzana had a girl, he would not allow her to grow up without strict Islamic guidance. After marrying Farzana, Iftikhar moved away from the Western culture he had once enjoyed. Shafilea Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986 in Bradford. People who knew her often called her Shaf. The family later moved to the Great Sankey area of Warrington. Shafilea went to Great Sankey High School, then to Barrowhall College, and in September 2003 she started at Priestley College. She was studying for her A-levels and wanted to become a solicitor. When she was growing up, Shafilea suffered physical and emotional abuse from her parents. One of her teachers saw a bruise and a cut on her lip. Shafilea told the teacher that her parents had beaten her. In February 2003, she ran away from home and asked social services to help her find a place to live. She said she was homeless, and the local council placed her in emergency hotel accommodation. When she filled out the application, she wrote that one parent would hold her while the other hit her. She was also afraid that her parents would take her to Pakistan and force her into a marriage she did not want. Later that same month, the family went on a trip to Pakistan. While they were there, Shafilea swallowed bleach. Her parents later said it was an accident, that she had drunk it in the dark because she thought it was mouthwash. But people who later investigated the case would call that explanation a lie. The bleach damaged her throat badly, and after the family returned to England, she needed regular medical care for that injury. News reports said that during the trip she had refused to accept a suitor in a forced marriage, though her parents denied that any pressure had been put on her. Despite the damage to her throat, Shafilea continued with her studies. She started at Priestley College in September 2003. She still had the hope of becoming a solicitor one day. On September 11, 2003, Shafilea was at home with her family in Great Sankey, Warrington. That day her parents, Iftikhar and Farzana, acted together. The reason for their action was that they believed Shafilea had brought shame to the family by refusing to accept the marriage they had arranged for her in Pakistan. They were also afraid that she would continue to reject their control and that this would damage their reputation within their community. That evening, Iftikhar took a plastic bag. He placed it over Shafilea's mouth. Farzana helped by holding their daughter so she could not escape. Together they suffocated her until she stopped breathing. The method they used left no external wounds. They chose this method because it would not make noise and would not draw attention from neighbors. After Shafilea was dead, her parents needed to remove her body from the house. They waited for the right time to avoid being seen. They transported her body away from Warrington. They drove approximately 70 miles to Cumbria, to the River Kent near a place called Sedgwick. There, they disposed of her remains. The river was chosen because it was far from their home and because water could help hide evidence. They did not leave the body whole. They dismembered it so that it would be harder to identify and so that pieces might be carried away by the water. They believed that if the body was never found, no one would be able to prove that a crime had happened. After the killing, Shafilia's parents did not report her missing. They told relatives and neighbors that she had run away. They said she had left on her own, as she had done before. For a full week after her death, no one outside the family knew she was gone. Her teachers at Priestley College noticed she was not attending classes. On September 18, 2003, 7 days after she was killed, the teachers contacted the police to report her absence. Only then did an official missing person investigation begin. When police started asking questions, Shafilia's parents repeated the story that she had run away. They did not mention the forced marriage or the arguments. They acted as though they were worried parents. Other members of her extended family were also questioned, and some gave statements supporting the parents' version of events. At that time, the police did not have enough evidence to arrest anyone for murder. The parents remained free. Detectives noticed that Shafilia had not sought medical help for her damaged throat. They knew she needed regular care for the bleach injury. Because she had not contacted any hospital or doctor, they began to suspect that she might be dead. They also learned from friends and teachers that Shafilia had been under extreme pressure from her family over an arranged marriage. Despite these suspicions, no one was charged in the weeks following her disappearance. Shafilia's parents continued to live in their home. They told neighbors that they hoped their daughter would come back. They did not report any crime. They did not help the police search. They relied on the fact that no body had been found and that there were no witnesses to the suffocation. In February 2004, heavy flooding hit Cumbria. The rising water swept through the River Kent near Sedgwick, and as the water moved, it uncovered human remains along the bank. A member of the public found the remains and contacted the police. Officers from Cumbria Constabulary arrived and began searching the area. The remains were in several parts and had been in the water for a long time. Decomposition made it difficult to see the cause of death. Forensic experts examined what was found. A gold bracelet with a zigzag pattern and a blue topaz ring were recovered with the remains. The pathologist, Dr. Allison Armour, could not determine how the person had died because the body was too badly decomposed. A second post-mortem ordered by the coroner also did not provide a cause of death. Investigators believed the body had been placed in the river either on the day Shafilia disappeared or very soon after. To identify the remains, police needed help from the family. They showed the jewelry to Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed, who confirmed that the bracelet and ring belonged to their daughter. Dental records were also used. Shafilia's dentist examined the lower jaw and said he was 90% sure it was hers based on previous dental work. DNA testing later made it a 1 in a billion chance that the remains belonged to anyone other than Shafilia. The police formally identified the body as hers. With the discovery of the body, detectives arrested Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed, along with 5 other members of the extended family. All were questioned and then released without charge. Police did not have enough evidence to prove who had killed Shafilia or who had disposed of her body. An unidentified human hair found on Shafilia's foot was not from her immediate family, but it did not lead to a suspect. The case remained open, but no further arrests were made for several years. In January 2008, a coroner's inquest was held. The coroner ruled that Shafilia had been the victim of a vile murder. Still, no one was charged. The breakthrough came in August 2010, nearly 7 years after Shafilia's death. Her younger sister, Alicia, arranged for a robbery to take place at her parents' home. The robbery happened while Alicia, her siblings, and her parents were inside. Police responded and arrested Alicia. During interrogation, Alicia told the police that her parents had killed Shephilia. She explained that Iftikhar had placed a plastic bag over Shephilia's mouth while Farzana held her down. Alicia said their parents were afraid that Shephilia's refusal to accept an arranged marriage would bring shame to the family. Based on Alicia's statement, Cheshire police reopened the investigation. They gathered witness accounts and reviewed the old evidence. On September 7, 2011, Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed were formally charged with the murder of their daughter. The trial began in May 2012 at Chester Crown Court. Prosecutors presented the evidence from Alicia and showed that the parents had lied about the bleach incident and about Shephilia running away. They also showed that the parents had tried to force Shephilia into a marriage she did not want. The defense argued that there was no physical proof of how Shephilia died and that Alicia was not a reliable witness. The jury did not accept the defense. On August 3, 2012, both parents were found guilty of murder. The judge, Justice Roderick Evans, sentenced each of them to life in prison. He set a minimum term of 25 years before either could be considered for parole. In his remarks, the judge said the parents had expected Shephilia to live in a sealed cultural environment separate from the culture of the country she was born in, and that this expectation was unrealistic, destructive, and cruel. After the trial, Cheshire police stated that they did not use the term honor killing because it is not a legal term. They said what happened was simply murder. Police also said they were looking into whether anyone else had helped the parents dispose of Shephilia's body, and they asked anyone with information to come forward. The chief executive of the Bradford Council for Mosques encouraged people to assist the police if they knew anything. Shephilia's close friend, Melissa Powner, spoke outside the court after the conviction. She said Shephilia was a caring, high-spirited, and brave young woman who had wanted to become a lawyer. She said the conviction had finally brought justice. In the years that followed, a charity called Karma Nirvana, based in Leeds, established a national day of memory for victims of honor killings. The date chosen was July 14th, Shephilia's birthday. The first national day was held in 2015 and has been held every year since. Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed remain in prison serving their sentences. Shephilia's body was returned to her family for burial after the identification, and her grave is in England. The case became one of the most well-known murder investigations in the country, and it led to wider public discussion about forced marriage and the protection of young people at risk. Story 2. David Russell Williams was born on March 7, 1963, in Bromsgrove, Worcestershire, England. His parents were Christine Noni Williams and Cedric David Williams. When David was 5 years old, in 1968, his family moved from England to Canada. They settled in Chalk River, Ontario, because David's father had a new job as a metallurgist at the Chalk River Laboratories, a nuclear research facility. Not long after the move, David's parents divorced. He was 6 years old at the time. Soon after the divorce, his mother married a man named Dr. Jerry Savka, who was a friend of the family. David then took his stepfather's last name for a while. The family moved to Toronto in 1970, and then to the suburb of Scarborough in 1975. David started high school at Birchmount Collegiate in 1978. But in 1979 the family moved again, this time to Busan, South Korea, where his stepfather was sent to work on a nuclear reactor project. The next year, when David was 17, he and his brother were sent back to Toronto to finish high school as boarding students at Upper Canada College, a private school. While there, he delivered the Globe and Mail newspaper in the mornings and learned to play the piano. In his final year, 1982, he was chosen to be a prefect for his boarding house, which meant he had some leadership duties. After high school, David went to the University of Toronto Scarborough. He studied economics and political science. During his time at university, he sometimes played pranks on his roommates. One of his pranks was to pick the locks on their doors and then hide in their rooms for hours, waiting to surprise them when they came in. He graduated in 1986 with a Bachelor of Arts. In 1987, David joined the Canadian Forces. He began flight training and received his pilot wings in 1990. His first posting was to CFB Portage La Prairie in Manitoba, where he worked as a flying instructor for 2 years. On January 1st, 1991, he was promoted to captain. On June 1st, 1991, David married Mary Elizabeth Harriman. In 1992, he was posted to CFB Shearwater in Nova Scotia, where he flew the CC-144 Challenger aircraft for electronic warfare and coastal patrol. 2 years later, in 1994, he was transferred to 412 Transport Squadron in Ottawa. There he flew VIPs, dignitaries and government officials, in the same type of Challenger aircraft. He was promoted to major in November 1999 and then worked as a career manager for other pilots at National Defense Headquarters in Ottawa. David continued to advance in his military career. In 2004, he earned a Master of Defense Studies from the Royal Military College of Canada. His thesis was 55 pages long and argued in favor of preemptive war in Iraq. That same year, in June, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel. A month later, he became the commanding officer of 437 Transport Squadron at CFB Trenton, Ontario, and he held that position for 2 years. From December 2005 to May 2006, he also served as the commanding officer of Camp Mirage, a Canadian Forces support facility in the United Arab Emirates that helped supply operations in Afghanistan. In 2006, he was posted back to Ottawa to work on airlift projects, helping to bring new military aircraft into service. He worked under a lieutenant general and was seen as a capable officer. In January 2009, he went to a language school in Gatineau, Quebec, for 6 months of French training. During that time, he was promoted to colonel. On July 15, 2009, David Williams was appointed wing commander at CFB Trenton, the busiest military airbase in Canada. The base handled transport operations and was also the place where the bodies of soldiers killed in Afghanistan were brought back to Canadian soil. As wing commander, he was in charge of the entire base. At the same time, David and his wife lived in a house in the Ottawa suburb of Orleans. They had also built a new home in the Westboro neighborhood of Ottawa, where his wife stayed full-time. David divided his time between the Westboro house and a property he owned near Tweed, Ontario, a small town about 2 hours from Ottawa. From the outside, David Williams appeared to be a successful military officer. He had flown Queen Elizabeth II and other high-ranking officials. He was respected by his colleagues. His career had followed a steady path of promotions and responsible positions. While David Williams held his high position at CFB Trenton, he was living a second life. In private, he was committing crimes. His criminal behavior started with breaking into houses. He did this to steal women's and girls' underwear. He had a pattern. He would drive to neighborhoods near his property in Tweed, Ontario, or near his home in Orleans, a suburb of Ottawa. He would go out at night, often when the people inside were sleeping. He was skilled at picking locks. He had learned this years earlier. Once inside a house, he would go to bedrooms and take underwear from dressers or closets. Sometimes he would wear the underwear himself. He would take photographs of himself wearing the stolen items, often while lying on the beds of the people he had stolen from. He also took pictures of the homes and the victims without them knowing. He kept careful records. He wrote notes about each break-in. He stored the stolen underwear in a hidden, organized way in his home. Between September 2007 and November 2009, he broke into or tried to break into at least 82 houses. Some of the underwear he stole belonged to girls as young as 9 years old. His crimes grew more serious over time. He moved from stealing to sexual assault. In September 2009, he carried out 2 separate home invasions near Tweed. In each one, he entered a woman's home at night. He forced the women to stay in their rooms. He tied them up. He sexually assaulted them. After each assault, he took photographs of the women while they were bound. He also took photos of himself. He then left. On November 25, 2009, Williams committed a murder. The victim was Corporal Marie-France Como. She was 37 years old. She worked as a traffic technician at CFB Trenton, the same base that Williams commanded. She lived in her home in Brighton, Ontario, not far from the base. Williams drove to her home at night. He broke in. He confronted her inside. He sexually assaulted her. Then he killed her. After the murder, he took photographs of her body and of himself in her home. He later removed items from the scene to hide what he had done. Almost 2 months later, on January 28, 2010, Williams committed another murder. The victim was Jessica Lloyd. She was 27 years old. She lived alone in her home in Belleville, Ontario, near Tweed. Williams went to her home at night. He entered while she was there. He sexually assaulted her. Then he killed her. Afterward, he took her body from the house and drove to a location he knew. He left her body there, in a rural area, to hide it. The next day, Jessica Lloyd's family reported her missing. Police began searching for her. They went to her home and examined the area around it. About 100 meters north of the house, near the tree line, they found tire tracks in the snow. The tracks showed a distinct tread pattern. The police believed the person who left those tracks was involved in her disappearance. 1 week after she went missing, police set up a traffic stop operation on the highway near her home. They stopped drivers who had been on that road during the night she disappeared. They looked at the tires of each vehicle. On February 4, 2010, a police officer stopped a Nissan Pathfinder. The driver was David Williams. The officer looked at the vehicle's tires. He noticed the tread pattern looked like the tracks found near Jessica Lloyd's home. The officer took note of Williams and his vehicle. At that time, the officer did not arrest him. The information was recorded and later given to the detectives working on the case. After the traffic stop, the police investigators obtained a warrant to examine the Nissan Pathfinder that David Williams had been driving. They compared the tire treads on his vehicle with the tire impressions taken from the snow near Jessica Lloyd's home. The treads matched. They also found boot prints at the crime scene. Investigators later matched those prints to boots owned by Williams. On February 7, 2010, police contacted Williams and asked him to come to the Ottawa Police Service headquarters for questioning. He arrived that afternoon. The interview was conducted by Detective Sergeant Jim Smith of the Ontario Provincial Police. At the start of the interview, Williams was not under arrest. The detective presented him with the evidence, the tire tread match, and the boot print evidence linking him to Jessica Lloyd's disappearance. For several hours, Williams denied involvement. But by 7:45 p.m., after being shown the strength of the physical evidence, he began to confess. He admitted to breaking into Jessica Lloyd's home, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. He then told police where he had left her body. He also admitted to breaking into the home of Corporal Marie-France Como, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. He confessed to the 2 sexual assaults from September 2009 near Tweed. He then told police about the dozens of break-ins and thefts of underwear. Williams offered to show police where to find evidence in his Ottawa home. That night and the next morning, officers searched the house. They found hidden compartments and storage areas. Inside, they recovered stolen underwear that was neatly organized and cataloged. They found thousands of photographs that Williams had taken. Some photos showed him wearing the stolen underwear. Others showed his victims, including images of them bound during the assaults. They found video files and written notes documenting each crime. Early on February 8th, Williams guided police to the rural location where he had left Jessica Lloyd's body. Investigators recovered her remains. That same day, Williams was formally charged and taken into custody. The Canadian forces immediately removed him from his command. After his arrest, Williams was held at the Kint Detention Center in Napanee, Ontario. In April 2010, he attempted to kill himself by pushing a stuffed cardboard toilet paper roll down his throat. Prison staff stopped him, and he was placed on suicide watch. Williams appeared in court by video link several times over the following months. On October 18, 2010, he stood before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Belleville and pleaded guilty to all charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of forcible confinement, 2 counts of breaking and entering and sexual assault, and 82 additional counts of breaking and entering related to the thefts of underwear. The trial lasted 4 days. The Crown prosecutor presented the evidence, including photographs and videos from Williams's computer. The court heard how Williams had kept detailed logs of police reports about his own crimes. The judge, Justice Robert F. Scott, reviewed all the facts. On October 22, 2010, Justice Scott sentenced David Williams to 2 life sentences for the 2 murders, with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. Because he was convicted of multiple murders, the law removed the possibility of early parole. He received additional sentences for the sexual assaults and forcible confinement, 2 10-year sentences, and 82 one-year sentences for the break-ins. All sentences were ordered to run at the same time, meaning he would serve the life sentences. Following the conviction, the Governor-General of Canada revoked Williams's commission. He was stripped of his military rank of colonel and all his decorations. His uniform was burned. His medals were cut into pieces. His commission scroll was shredded. His Nissan Pathfinder, the vehicle used in the crimes, was crushed and scrapped. He was allowed to keep his military pension, as terminating it would have required an act of Parliament. Williams was first incarcerated at Kingston Penitentiary in the segregation unit. After that prison closed, he was transferred to the Port Cartier Institution, a maximum security prison in Quebec. His wife filed for divorce shortly after his arrest, and the divorce was finalized years later. The families of Jessica Lloyd and Corporal Marie-France Comeau, along with the women Williams had sexually assaulted, were left to live with the harm he had caused. Williams remains in prison with no possibility of parole until at least 2035. The story of David Russell Williams ends where his freedom ended, locked away for the crimes he committed in the secret hours of his double life. Story 3. Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. was born on March 28, 1982, in Charlottesville, Virginia. His father, Jesse Matthew Sr., and his mother, Dolores Matthew, raised him in the same area where he would spend most of his life. He had siblings, and the family lived in a part of Virginia that included both the city of Charlottesville and the surrounding counties. As a child and teenager, Jesse attended schools in the Charlottesville area. He was known to those around him as a young man who kept to himself much of the time. After finishing high school, he began looking for a path forward. In the early 2000s, he enrolled at Liberty University, a private Christian college in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was a student there for a short time. During his time at Liberty University, a female student reported that Matthew had sexually assaulted her. The report was made to campus authorities and to police. Matthew left the school shortly after the report came forward. No criminal charges were filed in that case, but his time at Liberty ended abruptly. Less than 1 year later, Matthew enrolled at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. Again, while he was a student there, a woman reported that Matthew had sexually assaulted her. The police investigated this report as well. Once again, Matthew left the school immediately after the allegation was made. No criminal case was brought against him from that incident either. In both situations, he moved away from each university soon after the report surfaced, and he returned to the Charlottesville area. In the years that followed, Matthew lived in and around Charlottesville. He worked at times as a hospital patient transporter and in other jobs around the community. He was known to drive a light-colored sedan. He remained in the region where he had grown up, staying close to the places he had known since childhood. His life during those years was quiet on the surface, though the past accusations at the two universities remained known to some who had followed those cases. On the night of September 12, 2014, Hannah Elizabeth Graham, an 18-year-old second-year student at the University of Virginia, went out with friends. She had come to Charlottesville from her home in Northern Virginia to attend the university. Around midnight, she left a party where she had been with friends and began walking alone toward the downtown mall area of Charlottesville. At approximately 1:20 a.m. on September 13th, Hannah sent a text message to her friends. In the message, she said she was lost and trying to find another party. After that text, her phone stopped sending messages. Surveillance cameras from businesses along the downtown mall captured Hannah walking through the area over the next hour. One camera showed her outside a restaurant called Tempo. Inside that restaurant at the same time was Jesse Matthew Jr. He was 32 years old and living in Charlottesville. He had come to Tempo earlier that night. The camera footage showed Matthew inside Tempo. He was seen approaching Hannah outside the restaurant. A witness inside the restaurant later told police that Matthew had his arm around Hannah and that Hannah appeared to be under the influence of alcohol. The two were seen together inside Tempo for a short time. After they left the restaurant, another witness saw Hannah and Matthew near a vehicle parked on the street. The witness heard Hannah say clearly, "I'm not getting in that car with you." Despite her words, the witness saw Hannah get into the vehicle. The vehicle was later identified as Matthew's orange 1998 Chrysler Sebring. Hannah was never seen again after that moment. She did not return to her dormitory. She did not contact any of her friends. Her friends and family reported her missing later that day. Police began reviewing the surveillance footage from the downtown mall. They identified the man seen with Hannah as a person of interest. They also identified his orange Chrysler Sebring. Over the following days, police located Matthew's apartment and his car. They searched both. During the search of his apartment, officers took items of clothing, though they did not say at the time what those items were or why they mattered. Matthew was not immediately arrested for Hannah's disappearance. Instead, police issued a warrant for reckless driving based on how he had driven his car. They also named him publicly as a person of interest and asked him to come in for questioning. Matthew did not speak with police. He left Charlottesville shortly after the searches began. 5 weeks later, on October 18, 2014, searchers from the Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office found human remains on a property along Old Lynchburg Road in southern Albemarle County. The property was about 5 miles from where the remains of another young woman, Morgan Dana Harrington, had been discovered years earlier. The remains were sent to the medical examiner's office for identification. On October 24th, the remains were positively identified as Hannah Graham. The medical examiner later ruled her death a homicide, though the exact cause was listed as undetermined. While the search for Hannah was still underway, and before her remains were found, police had already charged Matthew with abduction with intent to defile in connection to her disappearance. That charge was filed on September 23, 2014. At the time the charge was filed, Matthew had already left Virginia. After the remains found on Old Lynchburg Road were identified as Hannah Graham, law enforcement continued building their case against Jesse Matthew Jr. while the search for Hannah was still active. Matthew had left Virginia. On September 24, 2014, a woman on a beach in Galveston County, Texas, recognized Matthew from news reports and contacted authorities. Police in Texas located him and took him into custody. He was later extradited back to Virginia to face the abduction charge. As investigators processed evidence from the Graham case, they discovered a connection to an earlier unsolved homicide. In 2009, Morgan Dana Harrington, a 22-year-old Virginia Tech student, had disappeared after attending a concert in Charlottesville. Her remains were found months later in Albemarle County. Forensic testing in the fall of 2014 showed that DNA evidence from the Harrington case matched Matthew. Investigators also determined that Harrington had interacted with Matthew on the night she vanished. On September 15, 2015, Matthew was formally charged with first-degree murder and abduction with intent to defile in the death of Morgan Harrington. In addition to the charges in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, Matthew faced prosecution for a separate attack. In October 2014, he was indicted in Fairfax County, Virginia, for an incident that occurred in September 2005. In that case, a woman had been assaulted near her apartment. Matthew was charged with attempted murder, object sexual penetration, and abduction with intent to defile. He initially pleaded not guilty, but in June 2015, as his trial was underway, he entered an Alford plea, meaning he did not admit guilt, but agreed there was enough evidence to convict him. He was convicted on all 3 charges and later received 3 life sentences in that case. The legal proceedings in the Graham case moved forward. In February 2015, Matthew was indicted for first-degree murder. The charge was later upgraded to capital murder, which made him eligible for the death penalty. On March 2, 2016, before his trial began, Matthew pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and abduction with intent to defile in the death of Hannah Graham. By pleading guilty, he avoided a trial and the possibility of a death sentence. Shortly after his guilty plea in the Graham case, Matthew also pleaded guilty to the murder of Morgan Harrington. In both cases, he received sentences of life in prison. For Hannah Graham's murder, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. For the abduction and murder of Morgan Harrington, he received 4 additional life terms. These sentences were added to the 3 life terms he had already received in the Fairfax case. Matthew was sent to Red Onion State Prison, a high-security facility in Virginia, where he remains incarcerated. Hannah Graham's family established a memorial scholarship in her name to honor her life. The World Bank also created an annual award in her memory to recognize efforts to reduce gender-based violence. The case came to a close when all legal proceedings against Jesse Matthew Jr. were finished, and he was confined to prison for the remainder of his life without the possibility of parole. Story 4. Farian Edward Wardrop was born on March 6, 1959, in Salem, Indiana. His parents were George and Diana Wardrop. He was their first child. Later, he gained 2 younger brothers. There are no reports that he was ever hurt or mistreated as a child. His family life did not have any known events that people later pointed to as signs of trouble. When Farian became old enough to go to school, he attended classes like other children. But he did not finish high school. He dropped out in the 12th grade. That meant he left school just before graduating. He was around 18 years old at that time. In 1978, when he was 19, Farian joined the United States National Guard. He served for 6 years. During those years, he was not sent to any war zone or combat duty. His time in the National Guard did not go smoothly. He received a discharge that was less than honorable. The reasons were that he used marijuana, behaved in disorderly ways, and was absent without leave multiple times. Because of these issues, his military service ended without an honorable discharge. In March 1983, Farian was 24 years old. He married a 20-year-old woman named Jonna D. Jackson. After they married, they had 2 children together. The marriage was not peaceful. Farian had problems with drugs and alcohol. His drinking and drug use caused trouble between him and his wife. That same year, in 1983, Farian found work as a janitor at Wichita Falls General Hospital in Texas. He worked there, and within 12 months he was given a new position. He moved from being a janitor to being an orderly. As an orderly, he had more duties and worked more closely with patients and medical staff. Even with this job, Farian's addictions made it hard for him to stay employed. He moved between jobs and could not hold one steadily. His wife's parents helped the couple by paying their rent and buying their groceries. They did this because Farian was not bringing in enough money to support the family. By December 1985, Jonna had grown tired of Farian's behavior. She was tired of his lack of responsibility and his continued drug and alcohol problems. She separated from him and took their children with her. Soon after the separation, she filed for divorce. The divorce was granted in October 1986. During these years, Farian lived in Wichita Falls, Texas. He worked at the hospital and moved through different jobs. He was a tall man, standing 6 feet 6 inches, and weighed around 220 pounds. He did not have any criminal record that was known to the public at this time. He was simply a man who had dropped out of school, served in the National Guard with a troubled record, married, had children, and then saw his marriage fall apart because of his drinking and drug use. His life up to this point was marked by instability. He could not keep a job for long. He used drugs and alcohol. His marriage ended, but there was nothing in the public record to suggest what he would later do. The people who knew him saw him as someone with problems, but not as someone who would become a killer. While Farian Wardrop's marriage and work life were falling apart, he began to commit murders. His first killing happened in December 1984, almost a full year before his wife left him. At that time, he was still working at the hospital in Wichita Falls. He was 25 years old. The first victim was Terry Lee Sims. She was 20 years old. She worked part-time at Bethania Hospital in Wichita Falls and also went to Midwestern State University. On the night of December 20th, 1984, she finished work and went with a co-worker named Liza Boone to a friend's house to exchange Christmas gifts. Terry planned to stay at Liza's apartment that night so Liza could help her study for an exam. But Liza got called back to the hospital to work the midnight shift. Liza dropped Terry off at her apartment around 12:30 a.m. on December 21st and gave Terry her key. After Liza left for work, Terry was alone in the apartment. Wardrop came to the area and began causing a disturbance outside. Terry went out to see what was happening. When she saw Wardrop, she ran back inside and locked the door. But Wardrop followed her. He broke the door down. He was 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 220 pounds. Terry was 5 feet 3 inches and weighed only 94 pounds. He grabbed her and sexually assaulted her. Because she fought back, he tied her hands with an electrical cord. Then he stabbed her to death. She was found on the bathroom floor in a pool of blood. When Liza returned home that morning, she found the door locked and could not get an answer. She got a key from the landlord and found Terry's body. Police investigated the scene. They collected a semen sample and a fingerprint from one of Terry's shoes. They kept these pieces of evidence for future testing. But at the time, they did not know who had killed her. The second murder happened less than 1 month later. On January 19, 1985, Wardrop killed Toni Jean Gibbs. She was 23 years old and worked as a nurse at Wichita General Hospital. Wardrop worked at the same hospital as an orderly, so he knew her. Early that morning, around 6 o'clock, he had been walking outside all night. Gibbs saw him and offered him a ride. He got into her car. Once inside, he began screaming at her and throwing her around. He He forced her to drive down an isolated dirt road to a field. He sexually assaulted her and stabbed her 8 times. 3 of the stab wounds were on her back, 3 on her chest, and 2 were on her left arm and thumb where she tried to defend herself. After the attack, he left her naked in the field. She managed to crawl about 100 feet before she died. He took her car and parked it legally at an intersection in Wichita Falls, less than a mile from where he lived. 2 days after she disappeared, her car was found. On February 15th, utility workers found her body near a field in Archer County, about 1 mile south of the Wichita County line. Near her body, police found an abandoned school bus. Inside the bus, they found her clothing. The attack had likely happened there. For days after her body was discovered, Wardrop quit his job at the hospital. Police did not connect the murder to Wardrop at that time. Instead, they suspected a man named Danny Wayne Laughlin. Laughlin had been seen on his motorcycle near where the body was found, and he had met Gibbs days earlier at a nightclub. He failed a lie detector test and made statements that police thought were suspicious. Laughlin was put on trial for Gibbs's murder. The DNA from the semen at the scene did not match him, but prosecutors still tried the case. After 2 days, the jury could not agree on a verdict. Only one of the 12 jurors thought Laughlin was guilty. Prosecutors decided not to try him again, and he was released. 2 months after killing Tony Gibbs, Wardrop went to Fort Worth, Texas. He said he was looking for work. In the early morning hours of March 24, 1985, he went to a bar on East Lancaster Street. There he met Deborah Sue Taylor. She was 25 years old. She had come to the bar with her husband, Ken Taylor, but her husband had left early because he was tired. Deborah stayed. Wardrop asked her to dance. She agreed, and they spent time together in the bar. After a while, Wardrop offered to drive her home. She accepted. Once they were outside, he tried to make sexual advances toward her. She rejected him. That made him angry. He killed her and left her body at a construction site in East Fort Worth. When Deborah did not return home by the next morning, her husband reported her missing. Her body was found on March 29th by 2 construction workers. Police did not know who killed her. They suspected her husband for a time. He passed 3 lie detector tests, but still some people in the family thought he might be guilty. The case went unsolved for years. The 4th murder happened on September 20th, 1985. The victim was Ellen Blau. She was 21 years old. She worked as a waitress in Wichita Falls and also attended Midwestern State University. That night, after she finished work, she was walking alone to her car. Wardrop abducted her. He forced her to drive to a secluded area. There he killed her by strangulation. He later said he broke her neck. After she was dead, he drove her car back into Wichita Falls and left it there. He also left her purse with the car. Her blood was found inside the car. A county road crew employee found her body on October 10th in a field in Wichita County. The body was badly decomposed. She could only be identified by her dental records. Her underwear was pulled down, which suggested she may have been sexually assaulted, but the condition of her body made it impossible to be sure. No semen was found. At the time, no one connected Wardrop to this murder either. The 5th and final murder happened on May 6, 1986. The victim was Tina Elizabeth Kimbrough. She was 21 years old and worked as a waitress. Wardrop had recently become friends with her. He went to her apartment. He suffocated her with a pillow. Later he said he did it because she reminded him of his ex-wife. After killing her, he left the apartment. Neighbors told police they had seen a white man, about 6 feet 2 inches tall, with dark brown hair, wearing a baseball cap, leaving the apartment complex. Danny Laughlin, the man who had been suspected in the Gibbs murder, did not fit that description, so police ruled him out. 3 days later, on May 9th, Wardrop called the police from Galveston, Texas, which was far from Wichita Falls. He told them he wanted to kill himself. When police arrived, he confessed to killing Tina Kimbrough. He was arrested and later convicted. He received a sentence of 35 years in prison. Because Wardrop confessed only to Kimbrough's murder, the other 4 killings remained unsolved. Police did not have DNA testing that could connect him to the earlier crimes. The fingerprint and semen from Terry Sims's murder were kept in storage, but were not matched to anyone. The investigations for Sims, Gibbs, Blau, and Taylor were separate. Different police departments handled them, and no one realized they were all done by the same man. Wardrop went to prison for Kimbrough's murder. He served less than 1/3 of his 35-year sentence. On December 11, 1997, he was released on parole. He moved to Olney, Texas. He was required to wear an ankle monitor that tracked his location. He was only allowed to go to work, home, and church. He got a job at a screen door factory. On October 15, 1998, he married a woman named Glenda Diane Kelly. He became active in a local church and gained a good reputation in the community. No one around him knew about the 4 other women he had killed. After Wardrop was released on parole in December 1997, the murders of Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, Ellen Blau, and Deborah Taylor remained unsolved. For years, the cases had been handled by separate law enforcement agencies. No one had connected them to each other or to Wardrop. That changed in 1999, when the Wichita County District Attorney's Office decided to reopen the murder cases that had happened in their jurisdiction. A detective named John Little was assigned to lead the cold case investigation. He started by looking at the evidence that had been kept from the earlier murders. DNA from the scenes where Terry Sims and Tony Gibbs were found had been preserved. New testing showed that the same man had killed both women. The DNA matched between the 2 cases. That meant the killer was still out there, and he had struck more than once. Detective Little began searching for links between the victims. He learned that during Wardrop's 1986 trial for Tina Kimbrough's murder, Wardrop had told someone that he knew Ellen Blau. That information had never been investigated at the time. Little looked into it and found that Blau had lived 1 block away from Terry Sims. He also confirmed that Wardrop had worked as an orderly at the same hospital where Tony Gibbs was a nurse. These connections made Wardrop a person of interest. At that time, police did not have a DNA sample from Wardrop. He was out on parole and living in Olney, Texas, working at a screen door factory. Detective Little needed to get Wardrop's DNA without alerting him. He went to the factory during Wardrop's coffee break. Little approached Wardrop and asked if he could have the paper cup Wardrop had been drinking from. Little pretended he needed it to spit out chewing tobacco. Wardrop handed over the cup. Inside the cup was Wardrop's saliva. The DNA from the cup was tested against the DNA from the Sims and Gibbs murder scenes. It was a match. On February 14, 1999, police arrested Farian Edward Wardrop. Once he was in custody, detectives questioned him. Wardrop confessed to killing Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, Ellen Blau, and also to the murder of Deborah Taylor in Fort Worth, which had never been linked to the others until that moment. He provided details that matched what investigators knew from the crime scenes. On November 9, 1999, Wardrop went to trial. He was 40 years old. For the murder of Terry Sims, the jury sentenced him to death by lethal injection. For the murders of Tony Gibbs, Ellen Blau, and Deborah Taylor, he received 3 life sentences. The sentence for Tina Kimbrough, the murder he had originally confessed to in 1986, was already served as part of his parole, but his parole was revoked and he was returned to prison. After the sentencing, Wardrop filed appeals. In 2008, a federal magistrate recommended that his death sentence be overturned, saying he had not received effective legal help at trial. But in 2011, a federal appeals court reversed that decision and sent the case back for reconsideration. In December 2014, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals dismissed his appeal. In September 2020, the Federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals denied his appeal and reinstated the death sentence. The United States Supreme Court later declined to hear his case. As of 2023, Wardrop remained on death row at the Polunsky unit in Texas. For the families of the 5 women, the convictions brought answers after years of uncertainty. Deborah Taylor's husband, who had long been suspected by some of killing his wife, was cleared. The other families learned that the man who had taken their daughters, sisters, and friends had finally been held accountable for all of his crimes. Farian Edward Wardrop, who had once walked free after serving only a fraction of a sentence, now faced the full weight of what he had done, and his name became a reminder of how careful police work and DNA evidence could close cases that had remained open for more than a decade. Story 5. Mark Leonard Bridger was born on November 6, 1965, at the War Memorial Hospital in Carshalton, Surrey. He was the second of 3 children. His father, Graham Bridger, worked as a policeman. His mother was named Pamela. The family lived in a semi-detached house in Wallington, Surrey, and it was there that Mark grew up alongside his older sister and younger brother. He attended John Ruskin High School in Croydon. When he left school, he had 7 CSE certificates. Not long after finishing his education, he began to get into trouble with the law. When he was 19 years old, he was convicted of firearms offenses and theft. Those were his first recorded convictions. In the 1980s, Bridger moved to Wales. He settled there and continued to work in different jobs. Over the years, he was employed as an abattoir worker, a hotel porter, a fireman, a lifeguard, a mechanic, and a welder. He changed jobs often. His personal life was also marked by a series of relationships. He fathered 6 children with 4 different women. In 1990, he married one of those women, the mother of 2 of his children. That marriage lasted only a few years before ending in divorce. While living in Wales, he collected more convictions. In 1991, he was found guilty of criminal damage, affray, and driving without insurance. The next year, in 1992, he was convicted again for driving while disqualified and driving without insurance. In 2004, he received a conviction for battery and threatening behavior. His 5th conviction came in 2007 for assault. By the late 2000s, Bridger was living in a small cottage in Sains, a village in Powys, Wales. He continued to live there, working occasional jobs and staying in the same area where he had lived for many years. On the evening of October 1st, 2012, a 5-year-old girl named April Jones was at home with her family in Mackinac, a town in Powys. Earlier that day, she had attended swimming lessons at a local leisure center while her parents went to a parents' evening at her school. After that, April invited a friend from school to come to her house. The 2 girls were allowed to play outside. April's mother told her not to stay out for too long. The last time her parents saw her was around 7 p.m. At about 7:15 p.m., April was playing with her friend and other children on the Brynwygog housing estate in Mackinac. The children were outside on the street, near where they lived. At some point, a vehicle came along the road. A child who was playing nearby later told adults what she had seen. A gray van had stopped, and April had climbed into it after speaking with the driver. The van then drove away. By 7:29 p.m., April's mother realized she could not find her. She called 999 immediately. A police officer from Dyfed Powys Police arrived at the scene. That first officer spoke to the child witness and learned about the gray van. Because a young child had been seen getting into a vehicle with an unknown person, the police quickly treated the situation as a critical incident. They began searching the area around Mackinac that same night. The news spread rapidly. Many local residents came out to help look for April. Social media also alerted people, and by the early morning hours of October 2nd, hundreds of volunteers had joined the search. The police focused their attention on the description of the gray van. They asked the public for information about any vehicle matching that description. Within hours, the police identified a man who lived in the area and owned a vehicle that matched the description. That man was Mark Bridger. He was a 46-year-old local who lived in a small cottage in Saines, a village a short distance from Mackinac. His vehicle was a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery, which was a type of van-like car. The child witness had reported seeing April get into a gray van, and Bridger's Land Rover Discovery was gray. Bridger was brought to the attention of the police because his vehicle matched the description given by the witness. At that point, officers began to focus on him as a person of interest. Meanwhile, the search continued across the town and the surrounding countryside, with hundreds of volunteers and police officers looking for any sign of April. On October 2nd, 2012, less than 24 hours after April Jones was reported missing, police arrested Mark Bridger at his cottage in Saines. He was taken into custody because his gray Land Rover Discovery matched the description given by the child witness who saw April enter a vehicle. That same day, forensic teams began searching his property. Over the following days, officers examined the inside of Bridger's vehicle and his cottage. They found blood in several places inside the cottage. Scientific testing later confirmed that the blood matched April Jones's DNA. In the fireplace, investigators discovered small fragments of human bone. A forensic expert examined them and determined that the bone fragments were consistent with a young person. The amount of blood found was significant enough that the police concluded April had suffered injuries from which she could not have survived. On October 5th, 2012, the police officially changed the investigation from a missing persons search to a murder inquiry. The following day, October 6th, Bridger was charged with abduction, murder, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. He later appeared in court, where an additional charge was added: unlawfully concealing and disposing of a body. He was held in custody while the investigation continued. The search for April's body went on for months. Hundreds of volunteers and specialist teams combed the countryside around Mackinac and the river near Bridger's home. It became the largest missing person search in UK police history. Despite the extensive efforts, April's body was never found. In April 2013, the formal search was called off, though police said they would respond to any new information. Bridger's trial began on April 29, 2013, at Mold Crown Court. During the trial, the prosecution presented the forensic evidence: April's blood found in Bridger's cottage, the bone fragments in the fireplace, and the fact that Bridger had lied to police about his movements on the night April disappeared. The prosecution argued that Bridger had taken April, killed her, and disposed of her body. In his defense, Bridger gave a different account. He claimed he had been driving while drunk and had accidentally run over April. He said he panicked and could not remember what he did with her body. He accepted that he was probably responsible for her death, but pleaded not guilty to murder, meaning he denied intending to kill her. The jury heard all the evidence over several weeks. On May 30th, 2013, they returned their verdicts. Bridger was found guilty of abduction, murder, and perverting the course of justice. That same day, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with a whole life order. This meant he would never be considered for parole and would remain in prison for the rest of his life. In his sentencing remarks, the judge called Bridger a pathological liar and a pedophile, noting that he had a collection of child abuse images on his computer. After the trial, it was reported that Bridger had made a confession to a prison chaplain. He claimed he had put April's body into the River Doulas, which flowed past his cottage. Police said they doubted this claim and believed he had scattered her remains across the countryside near his home. Several weeks after his sentence began, Bridger was attacked in Wakefield Prison by another prisoner using an improvised weapon. He suffered injuries to his face and throat and received stitches. Later that year, he began an appeal against the whole life order, but he dropped the appeal a month later before it could be heard. Though April's body was never recovered, a funeral was held for her on September 26, 2013, at St. Peter's Church in Mackinac. The coffin, which contained the small bone fragments found in Bridger's fireplace, was carried in a white hearse drawn by 2 white horses. Hundreds of people from the community attended. In 2014, Bridger's cottage in Sains was purchased by the Welsh government and demolished while members of April's family watched. The site where the cottage stood was cleared, and the family said they hoped it would bring some peace. The case also led to changes in how internet search engines handle searches for child abuse images. Following campaigning by April's parents, both Google and Bing changed their systems in November 2013 to block results from such searches. The story of April Jones ended with her killer imprisoned for life, her community mourning a child whose body was never found, and her family left to remember a 5-year-old girl whose life was taken before it had truly begun. Story 6. Samantha Louise Luthwaite was born on December 5, 1983 in Banbridge, a town in Northern Ireland. Her father, Andrew, had been a soldier in the British Army. Her mother was named Elizabeth. Samantha was their first child. Soon after Samantha was born, her father left the army. He found work as a lorry driver. The family moved to England and settled in Aylesbury, a town in Buckinghamshire. Samantha grew up there. She went to 2 local schools, the Elmhurst School and then the Grange School. When Samantha was 10 years old, her parents separated. The breakup was hard for her. Friends who knew her later said that she felt lost and looked for comfort elsewhere. At the time, the family had Muslim neighbors. Samantha saw that those neighbors had a close family life, and she began to spend time with them. Samantha had been raised as a Christian, but when she was 17, she decided to convert to Islam. She chose a new name, Sharafia, which she used among her Muslim friends. Her parents did not accept her conversion. They were unhappy about it, and over time the distance between Samantha and her family grew. After finishing school, Samantha started a degree at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. She studied politics and religion, but she did not complete the course. She left university before finishing her degree. While living in London, Samantha met a man named Jermaine Lindsay. They first connected online. Later they arranged to meet in person at a Stop the War march in Hyde Park. Jermaine was also a convert to Islam. On October 30th, 2002 they married in Aylesbury. For the ceremony they used Islamic names. She was Asmantra and he was Jamal. Samantha's parents did not attend the wedding because they still did not accept her change of faith. In the years that followed, Samantha and Jermaine had 2 children. Their first child, a son, was born in 2004. Samantha became pregnant again in early 2005. On the morning of July 7, 2005, Jermaine left their home. That day, 4 bombs exploded on London's transport system. Jermaine was one of the bombers. He blew himself up on a train between King's Cross and Russell Square underground stations. 26 passengers were killed in his attack. Samantha was 8 months pregnant at the time. She did not know where her husband was. 6 days after the bombings, she called a helpline that had been set up for families of the victims. She reported Jermaine missing. Later, when she learned what he had done, she gave a short statement in which she said she was horrified by the attacks and had never known he was involved. She called him a loving husband and father. After the bombings, someone tried to set fire to Samantha's home. The police placed her in protective custody in a safe house for her own safety. Not long after, she gave birth to her second child, a daughter. In September 2005, Samantha sold her story to a newspaper called The Sun. She was paid £30,000. In the article, she described herself as a victim and said her husband had been tricked into becoming a bomber by other people. Many people criticized her for taking money, while the families of the people killed in the bombings were still grieving. Some pointed out that her account did not match what Jermaine's own family had said about his earlier life. After that time, Samantha continued to live in England. She was known to have connected with other people who held extremist views. At some point, she met a man named Habib Salagani. In 2009, she had a third child, but she did not name the father on the birth certificate. Later, she moved to the north of England with her children. Her family heard little from her. Her father said they had not been in contact for a long time. Eventually, Samantha left the north of England and disappeared. Her relatives did not know where she had gone, and they were not sure where the children were. After Samantha Luthwaite left England, she traveled to Africa. The first time she entered South Africa was in July 2008. She used a false name. Over the next few years, she traveled in and out of the country several times. She obtained a South African passport under a fake identity. The name on the passport was Natalie Faye Webb. The real Natalie Webb was an English nurse who had no idea her identity had been stolen. Samantha used this passport to move across borders without being detected. In South Africa, she lived in Johannesburg. She rented properties in the suburbs of Mayfair and Bromhof. She found work at a halal meat factory in Lenasia, where she told people she was an IT specialist. While living there, she took out bank loans and used credit cards. She did not pay back the money she owed. She also gave birth to a fourth child at a private birthing center in Johannesburg in July 2010. For that birth, she used another false name, Asma Shaida bint Andrews. By 2011, Samantha had moved to Kenya. She entered the country from Tanzania on February 26, 2011, using the false Natalie Webb passport. She left and came back again on August 25, 2011, and then again on November 21, 2011. Each time she crossed the border, she used the same fake documents. Once in Kenya, she went to the coastal city of Mombasa. She moved into an apartment that belonged to the former wife of a man named Musa Hussein Abdi. Abdi had been a known financier for Al-Shabaab, a militant group based in Somalia. He had been killed in Somalia in June 2011. By moving into that apartment, Samantha placed herself inside a network of people connected to the group. In Mombasa, Samantha met other people who shared her extremist views. One of them was a British man named Jermaine Grant. He had come from London and had also converted to Islam. Another was Habib Salagani, a British man of Pakistani and Kenyan background. Together they formed part of a terrorist cell. Their plan was to carry out bomb attacks in Kenya. The group began gathering materials to make explosives. They rented a property near two large hotels in Mombasa, the Serena Beach Hotel and the White Sands Beach Resort. Samantha told the landlord that she was married to Habib Ghani, who used a false name, Marco Costa, on a fake Mozambique passport. The neighbors saw her as a white woman who kept to herself. They noticed she went to the mosque often and did not send her children to school. In late 2011, the cell was close to carrying out an attack. Their targets were hotels in Mombasa and possibly a shopping mall in Nairobi. They planned to strike during the Christmas holiday season when many tourists would be present. On December 19, 2011, Kenyan police raided a property in Mombasa where Jermaine Grant was staying. They arrested him. Inside the property they found bomb-making materials. Grant was using a forged Canadian passport under the name Peter Joseph. When the police questioned him, he told them there was a woman who was the leader of the cell. He said that woman was Samantha Luthwaite and that she was the one providing money for the operations. Shortly after Grant's arrest, police raided the apartment where Samantha had been staying. but she had already fled. She left behind items including a laptop computer, a photograph of herself, ammunition for an AK-47 rifle, 100 rounds of bullets, and detonators used for explosives. In January 2012, the Kenyan police issued an arrest warrant for Samantha. She was charged in her absence with possessing bomb-making materials and conspiring to make an explosive device with the intent to harm others. Because she had already left the country, she could not be taken into custody. The police later sent her fingerprints to Scotland Yard in London, and the fingerprints were confirmed to be hers. Samantha did not stop her activities. In June 2012, a grenade attack took place at a bar in Mombasa called the Jericho Bar. The attack happened on June 24th during a Euro 2012 football match between England and Italy. 3 people were killed and 25 others were injured. Witnesses said a white woman matching Samantha's description had been seen near the bar shortly before the explosion. Kenyan police named her as a suspect in that attack. The laptop that Samantha left behind in Mombasa was examined by investigators. On it they found more than 2,000 files. Among those files was a handbook titled the Mujahideen Explosives Handbook, which contained instructions for making bombs. They also found a poem she had written called Ode to Osama, praising the leader of Al-Qaeda. By this time, Samantha had become known to intelligence services in multiple countries. She was using at least 3 different identities. She was moving between Kenya, Tanzania, and Somalia. The group she was connected to, Al-Shabaab, controlled large areas of Somalia. Investigators believed she was helping them by raising money, acquiring weapons, hiding people, and transporting supplies. In September 2013, a major attack happened at the Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. Gunmen stormed the mall and killed 71 people, with about 200 more wounded. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. News reports began to ask whether Samantha was involved. The Kenyan president said a British woman might have taken part, though Al-Shabaab itself later said women were not used in that operation. The police in Kenya eventually named 4 people they believed carried out the attack, and they stated that Samantha was not among them. However, her name remained connected to the planning and support networks behind such attacks. By the end of 2013, some of the people Samantha had worked with were dead. Habib Salagani was killed in Somalia in September 2013 during a dispute within Al-Shabaab. Jermaine Grant remained in prison in Kenya, where he was later convicted for possessing bomb-making materials. Samantha herself was never captured. The investigation into Samantha Luthwaite began in earnest after the December 2011 raid in Mombasa. When Kenyan police arrested Jermaine Grant, they found bomb-making materials in his possession. That discovery led them to search the apartment where Samantha had been staying. Even though she had already fled, the police recovered physical evidence: a laptop, detonators, ammunition, and a photograph of her. They also collected fingerprints from the property. Kenyan police sent those fingerprints to Scotland Yard in London. Forensic experts compared them with fingerprints already held in British records from Samantha's earlier life in the United Kingdom. The comparison confirmed a match. This gave the Kenyan authorities certainty that the woman they were hunting was Samantha Luthwaite. With this confirmation, the police reconstructed her movements. They traced the false South African passport she had used under the name Natalie Faye Webb. Investigators in South Africa determined that the passport had been fraudulently obtained using stolen birth records. They discovered that Samantha had entered South Africa multiple times starting in 2008 and had lived in Johannesburg using that false identity. South African authorities canceled the passport and placed it on a stop list so it could not be used again. In January 2012, Kenyan prosecutors filed formal charges against Samantha. She was charged in absentia with possessing bomb-making materials and conspiring to commit a terrorist act. Because she was not in custody, a warrant for her arrest was issued. The Kenyan authorities then asked Interpol to help. In March 2012, Interpol issued a red notice, which is a request to all member countries to locate and arrest a person pending extradition. Meanwhile, Jermaine Grant remained in Kenyan custody after his arrest in December 2011. His trial began in the years that followed. The prosecution presented evidence that Grant was part of the same terrorist cell as Samantha. They showed that he had been caught with bomb-making components and that he had used a forged Canadian passport. Grant gave statements to police during the investigation in which he identified Samantha as the cell's leader and financier. The legal process took several years. In April 2019, Grant was convicted of possession of bomb-making materials. The court found that he had been preparing to commit a terrorist act. However, he was acquitted of the separate charge of conspiracy to commit a terrorist act. The judge sentenced him to prison for the offense he was convicted of. He remained in Kenya serving his sentence. For Samantha, there was no arrest. The investigation continued across multiple countries. Intelligence agencies in the United Kingdom, Kenya, South Africa, and the United States shared information about her movements. They believed she had crossed into Somalia, where al-Shabaab controlled large areas. Because Somalia had no central government that could cooperate with international arrest efforts, she could not be pursued there through normal police channels. In the years after 2013, sightings and reports about her faded. Security analysts said she was likely being sheltered in a remote location in Somalia or Tanzania. By 2022, her own relatives said they had not heard from her for many years, and her uncle stated that he believed she might be dead. No official confirmation of her death was ever released by any government. The victims of the attacks she was connected to included the people killed in the grenade attack at the Jericho bar in Mombasa in June 2012, as well as those who suffered in the planned attacks that were stopped by the December 2011 arrests. The families of those victims never saw Samantha Luthwaite brought to court. The Kenyan authorities kept the arrest warrant active, but she was never captured. Jermaine Grant remained in prison in Kenya. The other members of the cell, including Habib Salagani, died in Somalia before any legal proceedings could begin. The laptop and other evidence recovered from the Mombasa apartment remained part of the case file, serving as a record of how the plot was uncovered before it could cause greater harm. Samantha Luthwaite's story ended not with a trial or a sentence, but with her disappearance from sight, leaving behind only the evidence of the crime she was accused of and the unanswered question of whether she would ever be held to account. Story 7. Richard Matt was born on June 25, 1966, in Tonawanda, New York. Tonawanda is a small city near Buffalo. Richard had a brother named Robert. When Richard was young, his parents could not take care of him and his brother, so both boys went into foster care. Foster care means they lived with other families who were paid to look after them. As a child, Richard had trouble in school. He did not follow rules. Other children were afraid of him. He was known for scaring kids on the school bus. When Richard was around 13 or 14 years old, he stole a houseboat. A houseboat is a boat that people can live on. After he stole it, he was sent to a group home. A group home is a place where troubled young people live together with adults who watch them. But Richard did not stay. He escaped from the group home by riding a horse that he had stolen. He then hid in a large park called Allegheny State Park. When Richard became an adult, he kept committing crimes. During the 1980s and 1990s, he went to prison many times. The crimes he committed were burglary, rape, theft, and assault. He also tried to escape from correctional facilities more than once. This pattern of breaking rules and escaping started when he was a teenager and continued into his adult life. David Sweat was born on June 14, 1980. He grew up in the area around Binghamton, New York. His mother's name was Pamela Sweat. She raised David and his two sisters by herself. David's childhood was hard. He showed violent behavior even when he was young. He did not have a stable home life. When David was a teenager, his mother sent him to Florida to live with an uncle. The idea was that the uncle could help raise him. But while in Florida, David stole his aunt's car. He then crashed it and wrecked it. After that, he went into foster care. He moved from place to place. By the time David was in his late teens, he and his cousin, Jeffrey Nabinger, were homeless sometimes. They did not have a steady place to live. They found short jobs but did not keep them for long. They also started selling marijuana. David was known for planning burglaries carefully. He and his cousin would plan the steps before breaking into places. They were arrested several times in the late 1990s. Both of them were sent to prison for those crimes. In the early morning of July 4th, 2002, David and his cousin, along with another man named Sean DeVole, broke into a gun store in Pennsylvania. They stole firearms. When they returned to New York, a sheriff's deputy saw them moving the guns from one car to another in a parking lot. David shot at the deputy. He hit the deputy many times. Then he ran over the deputy with the car. The deputy was still alive. Then David's cousin shot the deputy twice in the face, killing him. All three men were arrested a few days later. David went to trial. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. That meant he would never be released. Unlike Richard Matt, David had never escaped from prison before this time. Richard Matt committed a murder in 1997. On December 3rd of that year, Richard and another man named Lee Bates kidnapped a 76-year-old man named William Rickerson. William had been Richard's boss before. Richard believed William had a large amount of money. Richard and Lee took William from his home in North Tonawanda. They drove for about 27 hours. They kept William locked in the trunk of the car. During the drive, they stopped several times, opened the trunk, and beat William. They tortured him. At the end, Richard killed William by breaking his neck. Then Richard cut the body into pieces and threw the pieces into the Niagara River. After that, Richard fled to Mexico. While in Mexico, in the city of Matamoros, Richard killed another man on February 20th, 1998. The man was Charles Perrault, an American engineer. Richard tried to rob Charles in a bar. He stabbed Charles to death in the restroom. Mexican police arrested Richard, and he was sentenced to 23 years in a Mexican prison for murder. In 2007, Richard was sent back to the United States to face trial for the murder of William Rickerson. Lee Bates, who had helped with the kidnapping, testified against Richard in court. Richard was found guilty of second-degree murder. He received a sentence of 25 years to life. That meant he would not be eligible for parole until 2032. During that trial, the authorities were worried that Richard might try to escape from the jail where he was held. They made him wear a stun belt. A stun belt is a device that can give an electric shock to stop someone from running away. They also placed snipers around the courthouse. Snipers are police officers with long-range rifles who watch from high positions. These steps showed that Richard was already seen as a dangerous man who might try to break free. By the time both men were in prison, Richard Matt was serving his murder sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in Dannemora, New York. David Sweat was also sent to the same prison because of his life sentence. Both men were eventually placed in a section called Honor Block. Honor Block was a special part of the prison for inmates who had shown good behavior. It gave them more freedom. They were allowed to use cooking stations, watch television, use wall telephones, take showers at certain times, and sit at card tables. The prison authorities believed these two men were following the rules and could be trusted with those small privileges. That was how Richard Matt and David Sweat came to live in the same prison, in the same block, with a set of privileges that most inmates did not have. Neither man had met before they arrived at Clinton, but they would soon find each other and begin to talk. In those conversations, they started to share their pasts and their ideas. Richard had escaped from facilities before, and David had a careful, planning mind. Together they began to look at the walls and the pipes and the tunnels behind them, thinking about what might be possible. Richard Matt and David Sweat shared a cell block at Clinton Correctional Facility, but they did not share the same cell. Their cells were next to each other along the same wall. At night, when other inmates were asleep and guards made fewer rounds, the two men began to talk through the wall. They discovered that both wanted to escape. Richard had done it before. David was good at planning. They decided to work together. The first step was to get tools. They could not get tools on their own inside the prison, so they looked for someone on the outside who could bring tools in. They found 2 prison employees who agreed to help. The first employee was Joyce Mitchell. Joyce worked in the prison tailor shop, where inmates made clothing. She had authority over inmates who worked there. Richard Matt was assigned to work in the tailor shop. Over time, Richard and Joyce developed a close relationship. He gave her paintings he made, and she began to feel attached to him. Later, David Sweat also came to work in the tailor shop. Joyce agreed to bring tools to the men. She placed hacksaw blades, chisels, and other cutting tools inside frozen hamburger meat. She put the meat in her lunch bag and brought it into the prison. She gave the meat to the men in the tailor shop. When they defrosted the meat, they retrieved the tools and hid them in their cells. The second employee was Gene Palmer. Gene was a prison guard. Richard Matt gave Gene paintings as well. In exchange, Gene agreed to bring tools into the prison. He smuggled in items such as drill bits and other cutting tools. He also gave Richard hot peppers and other small favors. Gene did not know that Richard and David were planning an escape. He thought he was simply helping an inmate who made art for him. With the tools hidden in their cells, the two men began cutting. They worked at night. They cut through the steel walls at the back of their cells. The cuts were made around the edges of the metal, creating an opening just large enough to crawl through. Behind the cell walls was a narrow utility area with pipes and wiring. Once through, they could move between the walls without being seen. From that utility area, they climbed up to a catwalk above the cells. The catwalk was a narrow platform used by workers to access pipes. The men used their tools to cut through a large steam pipe. The pipe was about 20 inches wide. It ran horizontally along the catwalk. They cut a hole in the pipe and climbed inside. Then they crawled through the pipe, following it down through the prison walls and under the ground. The pipe led them out of the prison building and into a sewer line that ran under the streets outside. The men planned for Joyce Mitchell to be their getaway driver. They told her to wait for them outside the prison in a car after they escaped. She agreed. She was supposed to pick them up at a manhole cover on a street about 500 feet from the prison wall. The manhole was the exit point from the sewer. The men even gave Joyce a map showing where they would emerge. On the night of June 5th, 2015, Richard and David put their plan into action. They went through the holes in their cells, moved through the utility area, climbed into the pipe, and crawled out through the sewer. They emerged from the manhole on the street. They were wearing dark clothing. They looked for Joyce Mitchell's car, but she was not there. She had changed her mind. She later said she felt guilty and still loved her husband, so she did not show up. With no getaway car, Richard and David had to proceed on foot. They walked away from the prison into the surrounding woods and rural areas. They had packed supplies, food, water, and some clothing that Joyce had also smuggled in for them. Inside the prison, the escape was not discovered until the next morning. At 5:17 a.m. on June 6th, guards did a routine bed check. They found that Richard Matt's cell and David Sweat's cell were empty. The guards looked inside the cells and saw the holes cut in the back walls. They notified their supervisors. Soon the prison went into lockdown. Authorities searched the area outside the prison. They found the manhole cover that had been moved. Inside the sewer pipe, they found a note left by the escapees. The note said, "Have a nice day," and included a drawing of a smiling face wearing a pointed hat like a rice farmer's hat. The note was a taunt. The prison administration realized that tools had been used. They began questioning staff. Joyce Mitchell and Gene Palmer came under suspicion quickly because they had close contact with Richard Matt. On June 12th, 6 days after the escape, Joyce Mitchell was arrested. She was charged with promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She admitted that she had provided the tools and agreed to be the getaway driver. She told police that she backed out at the last moment because she felt guilty. Gene Palmer was also arrested later. He admitted that he had smuggled tools and other items into the prison in exchange for paintings. He was charged with promoting prison contraband and other offenses. Meanwhile, a massive manhunt began. Hundreds of police officers, including state police, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Border Patrol, joined the search. They set up roadblocks. They searched farms, woods, and cabins. They used helicopters, dogs, and all-terrain vehicles. The search area covered many miles around Dannemora and expanded into nearby counties. Governor Andrew Cuomo offered a reward of $50,000 for each inmate, which was later increased to $75,000 each. In the first days after the escape, there were no confirmed sightings of Richard or David. They had moved through the woods at night. They broke into hunting cabins and seasonal homes to find food, clothing, and supplies. They took a shotgun from one cabin. They left behind trash and clothing that helped police track them. On June 20th, police received a tip about a sighting in the town of Friendship, which was far from the prison. The search shifted there for a time. But on June 22nd, police found a cabin near Owl's Head in Franklin County that had been broken into. Inside the cabin, investigators found DNA that matched Richard Matt and David Sweat. They concluded the two men had been there within the past 24 hours. The search then concentrated in the dense woods around Owl's Head. The two men were still together at this point, but they had become separated from their planned support. Without a vehicle, they were moving slowly on foot. They had to steal food and avoid roads where police were looking. The search was getting tighter. Richard and David had different skills. Richard was stronger and more impulsive. David was more careful. As the days passed and they remained on the run, they began to argue. Richard became less focused. David later said that Richard was slowing him down. The strain of being hunted and the lack of supplies made it harder for them to stay together. On June 23rd, the two men separated. Richard went one way. David went another. Each was now alone in the wilderness of northern New York, with police closing in from all sides. After Richard Matt and David Sweat separated on June 23, 2015, police continued searching the dense woods around Owl's Head in Franklin County. They had found DNA in a cabin that confirmed the men had been there recently. Hundreds of officers combed the area, knowing the escapees were still nearby. On June 26th, 3 days after the separation, a man driving a recreational vehicle on a remote road in the town of Malone saw Richard Matt. Matt fired a shotgun at the vehicle. The driver was not hit. The driver reported the incident to police. Officers converged on the area. A U.S. Border Patrol supervisory agent named Chris Voss, who was a former Army Ranger, encountered Matt in the woods. Matt raised his weapon. Agent Voss fired his gun. He shot Matt 3 times in the head. Richard Matt died at the scene. He was 49 years old. He had been free for 20 days. David Sweat was still at large. Police knew Matt was dead, but Sweat's location was unknown. The search continued with even more urgency, because Sweat was now alone and close to the Canadian border. On June 28th, 2 days after Matt was killed, A New York State Police sergeant named Jay Cook was driving on a road in the town of Constable, about 16 miles north of where Matt had died. Constable is very close to the Canadian border, only about 1.5 miles away. As Sergeant Cook drove, he saw a man walking along the side of the road. The man was dirty and wore a dark shirt and a baseball cap. Cook passed the man, then turned his vehicle around to go back and question him. When Cook turned, the man began running across a hay field toward a tree line. Sergeant Cook got out of his vehicle and chased the man. Cook was a firearms instructor. He saw that the man was about to reach the trees where he could hide. Cook fired his service pistol twice from a distance of 73 yards. One bullet hit the man in the right shoulder. The other hit his left arm. The man fell to the ground. Cook approached and identified him as David Sweat. Sweat was wounded but alive. He was taken by ambulance to a hospital in Malone, then transferred to Albany Medical Center, where he was treated for his injuries. His condition was listed as critical at first, but later improved. David Sweat had been free for 22 days. With both escapees accounted for, the investigation into how they escaped moved forward. The focus shifted to the people who helped them. Joyce Mitchell, the prison tailor shop employee, had already been arrested on June 12th. She was held in jail. She pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. At her sentencing, she was given a prison term of 2 1/3 to 7 years. She was also fined $6,375 and ordered to pay $79,841 in restitution, money to cover the cost of the manhunt and investigation. She served her sentence and was released on parole in February 2020. Gene Palmer, the prison guard, was arrested and charged. He pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband, a felony. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail and fined $5,375. He served 4 months and was released early for good behavior. David Sweat was still serving his original life sentence for the murder of the deputy. After he recovered from his wounds, he faced additional charges for escaping. He pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of first-degree escape and 1 count of promoting prison contraband. He was sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years in prison. The judge ordered that this sentence would be served after his existing life sentence, meaning it added time to his imprisonment. He was also ordered to pay $79,841 in restitution. Sweat was moved to 5 Points Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in Romulus, New York. In later years, he engaged in hunger strikes and had to be force-fed by court order. Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered a full investigation into the escape. The Inspector General released a report in June 2016. The report found that there had been long-standing failures in management and oversight at Clinton Correctional Facility. The report stated that 20 correctional employees had failed in their duties. Some had lied or misled investigators. The report was critical of how the prison was run. However, no criminal charges were filed against any other employees besides Joyce Mitchell and Gene Palmer. Some employees were demoted or suspended, and others resigned or retired. The escape cost the state about $23 million in search and investigation expenses. The prison made changes to its security procedures. Manholes and pipes were sealed. Inspections were increased. The section known as Honor Block was reviewed for security weaknesses. Richard Matt was buried after his autopsy confirmed he died from gunshot wounds to the head. His body showed a blood alcohol level of 0.18%, meaning he had been drinking alcohol found in one of the cabins he broke into. He died 1 day after his 49th birthday. The case came to a close with all parties held accountable. The 2 escapees had been killed or recaptured. The 2 prison employees had served their sentences, and the prison had been ordered to fix the security flaws that made the escape possible. The story of how 2 convicted murderers broke out of a maximum security prison through a hole in the wall and a steam pipe ended where it began, with both men back in the control of the state, one buried and one locked away for the rest of his life. Story 8. Travis Victor Alexander was born on July 28, 1977, in Riverside, California. His parents were Gary David Alexander and Pamela Elizabeth Morgan. When Travis was 8 years old, he left his parents' home and went to live with his paternal grandparents. The reason for this move was not widely explained, but it became a permanent arrangement. In July 1997, his father passed away. After that, Travis's 7 siblings also came to live with the same grandmother. This meant that Travis grew up in a household where he and his siblings were raised by their grandparents. As a young man, Travis got into fights before he joined a church. He later told a friend about this part of his life. He found an outlet in stand-up comedy, performing under the made-up name Eddie Snell. He also built a career as a salesman and motivational speaker for a company called Prepaid Legal Services, often called PPL. Through this job, he attended conferences and met many people. Jody Ann Arias was born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California. Her parents were William Angelo Arias and Sandra D. Allen. She attended school until the 11th grade, then she dropped out of Wairika Union High School. After leaving school, she worked at different jobs. She also had an interest in photography and hoped to build a career taking pictures. Jody eventually took a sales job with the same company, Prepaid Legal Services. In 2006, she attended a work conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. At that conference, she met Travis Alexander. Travis was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Jody decided to join that church, and on November 26, 2006, Travis baptized her in a ceremony in Southern California. After the baptism, Travis and Jody began dating in February 2007. Jody moved to Mesa, Arizona, to live closer to him. Their relationship was long distance at times, and they took turns traveling between Arizona and California. In April 2008, Jody moved back to Wairika, California, where she lived with her grandparents. During the time they were together, some of Travis's friends who met Jody had a negative view of her. They later said the relationship seemed unusually troubled and that Jody's behavior worried them. Jody lived with her grandparents in Wairika, California, while Travis remained in Mesa, Arizona. Their relationship had become unstable. They broke up, but they continued to see each other and stayed in contact. In the weeks before June 2008, Jody began making plans. She first staged a robbery at her grandparents' home. She took a handgun from the house and made it look like someone had broken in. She reported the gun stolen. The gun was a .25 caliber handgun. She later told people there had been a burglary, but she had taken the weapon herself. Jody then prepared for a long drive. She bought gas cans and filled them with fuel. She did this so she would not have to stop at gas stations where security cameras might record her. She also rented a car. On June 2, 2008, she left Wairika and began driving toward Arizona. She drove through the night and arrived in Mesa early on June 4th. On the morning of June 4th, Jody went to Travis's house. Travis was home alone. His roommates were not there, and they believed he was out of town later that day. Jody entered the house. At around 1:40 p.m., she and Travis took sexually suggestive photographs using Travis's digital camera. The photographs showed them together, and Jody later deleted those images from the camera. Later that afternoon, around 5:29 p.m., Travis got into the shower. Jody took a photograph of him in the shower. That was the last photograph taken of him alive. Moments after that photograph, Jody attacked Travis. She had brought the .25 caliber handgun and a knife. She stabbed him repeatedly. In total, Travis received 27 stab wounds. He also had his throat slit. Finally, she shot him in the forehead with the handgun. The medical examiner later determined that the gunshot may have happened after he was already dead or nearly dead. Travis had defensive wounds on his hands, which showed he tried to protect himself. After Travis was dead, Jody tried to clean up. She put the digital camera into the washing machine, likely to destroy evidence. She left the house. She then drove away from Mesa. Jody drove north to Utah. She arrived in the Salt Lake City area on June 5th. There she met a man named Ryan Burns, whom she knew from work. She attended business meetings with him. Ryan Burns later noticed that Jody's hair had changed. It had been blonde, but now it was dark brown. He also saw that she had cuts on her hands. When he asked about the cuts, Jody told him she had cut her hands on broken glass while working at a restaurant called Margaritaville. Jody stayed with Ryan Burns until June 6th. Then she left and drove west toward California. During the drive, she called Travis's phone several times. She left voicemail messages. She also accessed his cell phone voicemail system, listening to messages that others had left for him. On June 7th, Jody returned the rental car. The car had been driven about 2,800 miles, which was far more than a normal trip. The rental clerk noticed red stains on the front and rear seats. The floor mats were missing from the car. The clerk noted these things, but the car was cleaned before any further examination could be done. On June 9th, 2008, Travis's friends became concerned because they had not heard from him for several days. He had missed an important conference call on June 4th, and he was not answering his phone. A group of friends went to his house in Mesa. His roommates had not seen him, but they thought he might be out of town. The friends found a key to Travis's bedroom and went inside. In the hallway leading to the master bathroom, they saw large pools of blood. They followed the blood and found Travis's body in the shower. One of them called 911. During the call, the dispatcher asked if Travis had been suicidal or if anyone was angry enough to hurt him. The friends immediately mentioned Jody Arias by name. They told the dispatcher that Travis had said Jody was stalking him, accessing his Facebook account, and slashing his car tires. Police arrived and began processing the scene. They found Travis's digital camera inside the washing machine. It had been damaged, but they were able to recover deleted photographs. Some of the recovered images showed Jody and Travis in sexually suggestive poses taken on June 4th around 1:40 p.m. Another photograph showed Travis alive in the shower at 5:29 p.m. Photographs taken moments later showed a person believed to be Travis bleeding heavily on the bathroom floor. Investigators also found a bloody palm print on the hallway wall. Later testing showed that the print contained DNA from both Jody and Travis. Police began looking for Jody. At first, when questioned, Jody told them she had not been in Mesa on the day of the murder. She said she had last seen Travis in March 2008. On the second day of interrogation, she changed her story. She admitted she had been at Travis's house, but she claimed 2 intruders broke in, murdered Travis, and attacked her. She said she fled because she was afraid. On July 9, 2008, a grand jury in Maricopa County, Arizona, indicted Jody Arias for first-degree murder. 6 days later, on July 15th, she was arrested at her home in California. She was extradited to Arizona on September 5th. On September 11th, she pleaded not guilty. 2 years after her arrest, Jody changed her story again. She said she had killed Travis in self-defense. She claimed he had been physically and emotionally abusive toward her, and that on June 4th he attacked her, forcing her to fight for her life. The trial began in January 2013. The prosecutor told the jury that Jody had planned the murder. He pointed to the staged robbery to obtain the gun, the purchase of gas cans to avoid detection, the long drive, and the fact that she cleaned the scene and lied afterward. The defense argued that Travis had been violent and that Jody acted in self-defense. Jody testified for 18 days. She described her relationship with Travis, including their sex life, and she claimed he had been abusive. A psychologist called by the defense said Jody had post-traumatic stress disorder and was a victim of domestic violence. A psychologist called by the prosecution disagreed, diagnosing her with borderline personality disorder and stating she was not a victim of abuse. During the trial, the jury was shown the recovered photographs from the camera. They also heard about the cuts on Jody's hands and her explanation about a restaurant called Margaritaville. A detective testified that no such restaurant existed where she claimed to have worked. On May 8, 2013, after 15 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jodi Arias guilty of first-degree murder. All 12 jurors agreed she had premeditated the murder. The same jury then had to decide if the murder was cruel, heinous, or depraved, which would make Jody eligible for the death penalty. After hearing testimony, the jury determined that she was eligible. The next phase was the penalty phase, where the jury would decide between death and life in prison. On May 23, 2013, the jury announced they could not reach a unanimous decision on the sentence. The judge declared a mistrial for the penalty phase. The jury had voted 8-4 in favor of the death penalty. A second penalty trial was held starting in October 2014. In March 2015, that jury also could not reach a unanimous decision. The vote was 11-1 in favor of the death penalty. The judge declared another mistrial. Because the juries could not agree on the death penalty, the judge was required to sentence Jody. On April 13, 2015, Judge Sherry Stevens sentenced Jodi Arias to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the sentence, Jody was sent to the Arizona State Prison Complex at Perryville. She began her sentence in a maximum security unit, but was later moved to medium security. In 2018, her lawyers filed an appeal, claiming that media coverage and misconduct by the prosecutor prevented her from getting a fair trial. In 2020, an appeals court ruled that while there had been egregious prosecutorial misconduct, the evidence against Jody was so strong that her conviction should stand. The Arizona Supreme Court declined to review the case later that year. Travis Alexander was buried at Olivewood Memorial Park in Riverside, California. His family attended the trials and watched as the case concluded. In 2015, the court ordered Jody to pay more than $32,000 to Travis's siblings for funeral costs and other expenses. The story of what happened on June 4, 2008, was fully investigated, and after 2 trials and multiple appeals, Jodi Arias remains in prison serving a life sentence with no chance of parole. Story 9. Grant Robichaux was born in Louisiana. He grew up in a middle-class family. His parents valued education and hard work. From a young age, Grant was interested in science and sports. He played football in high school and did well in his classes. Teachers described him as smart and confident. He learned to be outgoing and comfortable in social settings. After high school, Grant decided to study medicine. He enrolled at Louisiana State University. He worked hard through his undergraduate years and then entered medical school at the same university. During medical school, he focused on becoming a surgeon. He completed his degree and earned his medical license. His next step was to move to California for further training. He was accepted into the residency program at the University of California, Irvine Medical Center. There, he trained in orthopedic surgery. Orthopedic surgery deals with bones, joints, and muscles. He spent several years learning from experienced surgeons and treating patients. He passed the required exams and became a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. This meant he had reached a high level of skill recognized by the medical board. After finishing his residency, Grant settled in Orange County, California. He began working as a surgeon. He joined a practice and saw patients regularly. He earned a good income and lived in Newport Beach, a wealthy coastal city. Newport Beach was known for its beaches, boats, and upscale lifestyle. Grant fit into that world. He was tall, athletic, and well-spoken. He dressed well and drove nice cars. People who met him found him charming. In 2013, a local magazine called Orange Coast Magazine named Grant Robichaux Orange County's most eligible bachelor. The title was given to him because he was single, successful, and seen as a desirable partner. The article mentioned his career as a surgeon, his good looks, and his active social life. He was photographed in a suit, smiling. The recognition raised his profile in the area. He began to be known not just as a doctor, but as a local personality. The following year, in 2014, Grant appeared on a Bravo television show called Online Dating Rituals of the American Male. The show followed men as they looked for girlfriends through dating apps and websites. Grant was featured in one episode. The cameras showed him going on dates and talking about what he wanted in a partner. He came across as confident and easygoing. After the episode aired, more people in Orange County recognized him. He became a minor celebrity in his community. Strangers sometimes approached him to say they had seen him on TV. During these years, Grant maintained an active social life. He went to bars, restaurants, and parties around Newport Beach. He used dating apps frequently. Friends and acquaintances later said he often dated multiple women at the same time. He was known for being persuasive and for enjoying alcohol and parties. He owned firearms and kept them in his home, which was not unusual among some residents of the area. Grant also began a relationship with a woman named Sarissa Riley. She became his girlfriend. They spent time together and often went out as a couple. People who saw them thought they seemed close. Grant continued his work as a surgeon while also enjoying the nightlife of Orange County. By 2016, he was in his late 30s. He had a successful career, a known name from television, and a lifestyle that many people envied. This was the life Grant Robichaux had built for himself. He had come from Louisiana to California, worked hard to become a surgeon, and then gained attention as a bachelor and a reality TV figure. He was well known in Newport Beach, and he used his charm and status to move easily through social circles. In early 2016, Grant Robichaux and his girlfriend, Sarissa Riley, were living together in Newport Beach. They often went to bars and restaurants in the area. They presented themselves as a friendly, fun-loving couple. When they met women in these places, they would strike up conversations. They were charming. They offered drinks. They made the women feel at ease. The pattern they used was consistent. They would find a woman at a bar or restaurant. They would talk to her, sometimes for hours. They would buy her alcohol and encourage her to drink. If the woman became very drunk, they would invite her to an after party. The after party was not a party with many people. Instead, they would take the woman to Grant's apartment. Once inside, they would give her more alcohol or other substances. The goal was to make the woman so intoxicated that she could not resist or remember what happened. Then Grant and Sarissa would sexually assault her. Sometimes they filmed the acts. The first known incident happened in April 2016. A woman was at a local restaurant in Newport Beach. She met Grant and Sarissa there. They talked with her and offered her drinks. She drank a large amount of alcohol. Later, they invited her to an after party. She agreed and went with them to Grant's residence. Once at the apartment, she became even more intoxicated. At some point, she lost the ability to control herself or say no. Grant and Sarissa then drugged her, raped her, and performed oral sex on her without her consent. She was not able to fight back or understand fully what was happening. The next morning, after she woke up, she realized she had been assaulted. She immediately contacted the police. She went to a hospital or clinic, and a test was done on her blood. The test showed multiple controlled substances in her body. These were drugs that she had not taken voluntarily. In October 2016, another incident took place. Grant and Sarissa were at a bar in Newport Beach with a woman. They drank alcohol together. Grant and Sarissa encouraged the woman to drink heavily. The woman eventually lost consciousness. She was so drunk that she passed out. While she was unconscious, Grant and Sarissa took her to Grant's apartment. Once there, they began sexually assaulting her. At one point, the woman started to regain awareness and screamed for help. A neighbor in Grant's building heard the scream. The neighbor called the Newport Beach Police Department. Officers responded to the call. When they arrived, they found the woman in a distressed state. She told them she had been assaulted. The officers wrote a report. At the time, the police had suspicions about what had happened, but they did not have a clear identification of the suspects. The woman later confirmed that the people who assaulted her were Grant and Sarissa. Between these incidents and others, Grant and Sarissa continued to use a similar method. They would go out, look for women, and use alcohol and drugs to make them helpless. They used drugs such as gamma-hydroxybutyric acid (GHB), which is known as a date rape drug, as well as MDMA and cocaine. They gave these drugs to women without their knowledge or consent. The drugs caused the women to lose control of their bodies and their memory. Many victims later said they could not remember what happened after a certain point. Some woke up in Grant's apartment with no clear memory of how they got there. Grant used his status as a surgeon and his minor fame from television to gain trust. He also used dating apps to meet women. He and Sarissa sometimes posed as a couple looking for a third person to join them. This made the women feel that the situation was safe and consensual. But once the women were intoxicated to the point of incapacity, the couple would assault them. They filmed many of these acts on video. The videos showed the women in states of extreme intoxication. They were barely responsive. They could not speak clearly or move their bodies. They were unable to give consent. Over time, multiple women in the Newport Beach area experienced similar events. Some of them did not report what happened because they were ashamed or could not remember clearly. Others went to the police. The Newport Beach Police Department began to notice a pattern. They received reports of sexual assaults where the victims described a couple who would take them from bars to an apartment. But for a while, the police did not have a name or enough evidence to move forward. They kept the reports on file. By early 2018, the police had gathered enough information to focus on Grant Robichaux and Sarissa Riley. They believed the couple was responsible for multiple assaults. On January 9, 2018, police officers went to Grant's home with a search warrant. They searched the apartment. Inside, they found firearms, including 2 illegal unregistered assault rifles for other guns and several large-capacity magazines. They also found large quantities of illegal drugs. Among the drugs were GHB, MDMA, and cocaine. The presence of GHB was especially significant because it is often used to incapacitate victims. The police collected these items as evidence. After the search, the police continued their investigation. They interviewed victims and gathered more evidence. On September 6, 2018, the Newport Beach Police Department turned over the entire investigation to the Orange County District Attorney's Office. The district attorney reviewed the evidence. 5 days later, on September 11, 2018, the district attorney filed formal charges against Grant Robichaux and Sarissa Riley. The charges included multiple felonies related to drugging and sexually assaulting women. Grant was charged with sexually assaulting 7 women. Sarissa was charged with sexually assaulting 5 of those same women. Grant was also charged with possessing illegal firearms and drugs. The next day, September 12, 2018, detectives arrested Grant and Sarissa. They were both taken into custody. After their arrests, They were each released after posting bail of $100,000. At this point, they were awaiting trial. The California Medical Board also opened an investigation into Grant's conduct as a surgeon. The board wanted to determine if his actions outside the hospital violated medical ethics or the law. In a press conference after the arrests, the district attorney revealed that detectives had found videos on Grant's devices. One video showed a sex act with a victim who was clearly incapacitated. The district attorney said there were many more videos. He stated that the victims in the videos appeared highly intoxicated, beyond the ability to consent or resist. The videos showed the women barely responsive to sexual advances by Grant and Sarissa. This evidence became a central part of the case against them. After the arrests in September 2018, the case against Grant Robichaux and Sarissa Riley moved into the court system. The Orange County District Attorney's Office, led by Tony Rackauckas, was in charge of the prosecution. For more than a year, the case remained in a holding pattern. Both defendants pleaded not guilty to the charges. They remained free on bail while their lawyers and the prosecutors prepared for trial. In February 2020, a new district attorney took office. His name was Todd Spitzer. He had run for the position against Tony Rackauckas and won. Soon after taking office, Spitzer reviewed the case. He believed that Rackauckas had used the case to attract positive media attention before the election. Spitzer stated publicly that he would move to have all charges against Robichaux and Riley dropped. He filed a motion asking the judge to dismiss the case. In June 2020, Orange County Superior Court Judge Gregory Jones held a hearing on the motion to dismiss. Judge Jones refused to drop the charges. He said that both Rackauckas and Spitzer had used the case against each other while campaigning. He found that the reasons Spitzer gave for dismissing the case were not legally sufficient. The judge ordered that the case should go forward. After Judge Jones denied the motion, the case continued. But the conflict between the two district attorneys created delays. Later in 2020, the Attorney General of California stepped in. The State Attorney General's office took over the prosecution from the Orange County District Attorney's office. The goal was to remove the case from local political disputes and handle it more neutrally. In July 2021, the case suffered another setback. A judge in Orange County Superior Court dismissed the charges related to 2 of the 7 women who had been named as victims. These 2 women had come forward to the court. They said they no longer wanted to participate in the case. They stated that they had been dragged through the mud by the Orange County District Attorney's Office during the earlier stages of the prosecution. With their unwillingness to testify, the prosecution could not move forward on those counts. The judge dismissed those specific charges. The remaining charges still stood, but the case was now weaker. The prosecution continued to prepare for trial, but the delays and the loss of 2 victims made the case harder to prove. On July 7, 2023, Orange County Superior Court Judge Michael Leverson made a final ruling on the sexual assault charges. He reviewed the evidence that remained. The prosecution had presented its case, but the judge determined that the evidence was not sufficient to support the charges. He dismissed all sexual assault charges against Grant Robichaux and Sarissa Riley. The 2 were no longer facing trial for drugging or raping any of the women. Even though the sexual assault charges were dropped, Grant still faced legal consequences for the weapons and drugs found in his home during the January 2018 search. The state continued to pursue those charges separately. On November 29, 2023, Grant Robichaux entered into a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of possessing an illegal, unregistered assault rifle. He also pleaded guilty to 1 misdemeanor count of possessing psilocybin, a controlled substance. Under the terms of the plea, he did not admit to any sexual assault. For the felony gun charge, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation. For the misdemeanor drug charge, he received 1 year of probation. The two sentences ran at the same time. Sarissa Riley's charges related to the sexual assaults were also dismissed, and she was not prosecuted for the weapons or drugs found in the home. After the conclusion of the criminal case, Grant Robichaux filed a civil lawsuit. He sued Orange County, along with several officials and law enforcement agencies involved in his arrest and prosecution. In the lawsuit, he alleged that he had been the victim of malicious prosecution. He claimed that the case against him was brought without proper evidence and was used for political purposes. He asked for unspecified damages. The case that had once drawn international attention ended with no convictions for sexual assault. Grant Robichaux remained a free man on probation for the gun and drug charges. Sarissa Riley faced no further legal action. The women who had come forward saw their cases dismissed without a trial, and the videos and other evidence gathered by police never led to a jury's verdict. The story of Grant Robichaux closed not with a dramatic trial or a long prison sentence, but with a plea deal for weapons and drugs, a civil lawsuit filed afterward, and the sexual assault allegations left unproven in a court of law.